Good morning and welcome to Frontiers of Knowledge segment of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. We live in this world and are amazed, wonderstruck by many things which come to our notice but we ignore them. The pitfalls of progress and materialization, the materialistic outlook makes us blind to those interesting facts of life and of nature. But there is a certain beauty in them, certain charm, certain attraction. And not only that, they are precursors to advancement of knowledge. I was just reading about half an hour back that in the Pacific Ocean, they have discovered an octopus. Now, I was amazed. I had never known that there are a number of aquatic animals like frogs, comb jellies, and now, for the first time, even an octopus which are absolutely transparent like glass. And we call them glass creatures, glass frog, glass comb jelly, and now elusive glass octopus. In these rare glass aquatic animals, only the optic nerve and digestive tract are opaque. You can't see them, but otherwise the whole body of these aquatic animals is transparent. You can even see the innards. And this glass octopus was seen in Pacific. Normally they don't see it. It was and it was done by an underwater robot. The robot filmed it gracefully, soaring into the deep waters of the central Pacific Ocean. As I said earlier, only the cylindrical eyes, optic nerve, and digestive tract appear to be played. And they say that there were two encounters with the glass octopus, and it's an impressive count considering that till now they have never seen an octopus, though the other aquatic animals very rare. And this was seen in Phoenix Island, which is 3,000 miles away from Sydney, Australia. And the scientists say that by studying chunks of them in the, especially their guts, can give the information about the predators and also provide links to the gut and microbes of the human beings. Marvelous and amazing, isn't it? And then, progress tells us, and now we have the facilities to take notes on the computer. The automatic note taking is done. And we put everything on our laptops, on our iPads, and our phones. But a study has been conducted. It's an intriguing new study. And this study has been done by the Japanese researchers. They say that the handwriting on paper using pen and paper, it beats the stylus which you use on the iPad or on the laptop. And the memory retention is much better if you use pen and paper or pencil and paper. The researchers hypothesize that the richer spatial detail of writing on paper explains that it could enhance the encoding of information in the brain. So, using stylus, using screen might be quite modern and indicative of our advancement. But in fact, it is harmful. And for several years, researchers have been investigating the difference in the brain activities between handwriting and typewriting. Some cognitive scientists have suggested the neural process involved in handwriting involves greater brain activity in regions linked with encoding new information. This new information, new research published in Frontiers in Behavioral Neuroscience, sets out to investigate any apparent difference. And 48 university students were recruited for this experiment. And each subject read a fictionalized conversation between several students. And then they were asked to write. The group that recorded their schedule on paper notepads had markedly better understanding, retention than those who did it on a tablet. And the worst was who did it on a smartphone with a touch screen keypad. So this is your progress. Take it up. There's no harm in that. And interestingly, an hour after the initial task was completed, they were given a series of questions testing their memory. Can you believe the people who were writing with a pen on paper, their retention was 97%. Those who were writing on tablet, their retention was 46%. And those who were writing on the touch screen on their phones, the retention was 8.2%. The activity in certain brains is significantly higher. So we see, not significantly, it's remarkably higher. The significant security, betterment is both in accuracy and activation in the paper group suggests the use of paper notebook would promote the acquisition of rich encoding information and spatial information. So, if you want your kids to have a better memory, better retention, even if they use the cell phones and the tablets, tell them to write as much as possible with pen and paper. Ideal is pencil and paper. Amazing. And then interestingly, the old style chalk and slate is also preferable. But anything done with your hand and your eye synchronization with your hand, where that it's slow because it makes an impact. So these two factors, first is that this gloss octopus I talked about, and then this retention. But then the wonders of life don't come to an end. Are you aware why the hummingbirds hum? I had a hummingbird feeder in my lawn, and the hummingbird would come and hum, and it was a very interesting sight. Colorful birds get their name from the hum generated and the fast moving wings, very small, tiny birds, and the wing beat of all the birds. According to the scientists, these aerodynamic marvels are the fastest flying birds in the world. They fly 70 strokes per second. That means more than 4,000 strokes per minute. But how exactly do the wings produce a humming sound? So the scientists created a first ever 3D acoustic model of the flying hummingbirds, combining video and audio recording of the birds in motion with measurements. And they trace the humming sound to be the upstroke of the bird's wing beats. So the wing beat not only helped the birds with an extra boost of lift, they could go higher, but it was also producing music. And to capture all the elements of the flight, the researchers used sensitive pressure plates that measure the force of the wing beat. More than a dozen high speed cameras were used, 2,176 microphones were used, and voila, we know that the wing, as it goes up, lifts the bird up and then produces a sound because of the modulation of the wind created by the flapping of the wings. And this sound of the hummingbird is really, really quite rhythmic and mesmerizing. Are you amazed? Well, if not, the next one would definitely tell you. Do you know that the plants can tell time? They don't have a clock to look at, they don't look at their phone or their wristwatch. The plants have an internal clock, like human beings have, but the human beings have, most of them, stopped ignoring that. What does this mean? This means that it could improve agriculture. Plants have cells known as circadian clock genes. That gene enables them to measure daily and seasonal rhythms, and it could lead to crop breeding for higher yields. So, if we understand the and correlate with the, correlate with the circadian clock of the birds, then we can arrange to see the agriculture output is enhanced. And the plants grow much better when the internal clock is matched to the environment they grow in. And this has been done by the University of Cambridge. But the question arises, how do they tell the time? They have seen that the rhythmic supply of light we find in the day and the night cycles, the dark and the day, and the changes in the light modules impact the evolution of the circadian clock. These clocks modulate most of the plant's physiology, photosynthesis, metabolism, and the development. They call it chronoculture, the culture with the help of time. And the plant responses to the pests are also optimized according to the time of the day. So just as a simple light in the refrigerator lorry going on mimics the day and night, the plant's internal clock helps them improve storage of water, food, nutrients. Now, these genes can contribute to the regulation of flowering, biomass, photosynthesis, water use, temperature stress response, and pathogen defenses. These are important yield components in any plant crop. So if you can modulate the circadian clock, then even the growing of the food can be accelerated. So even I mean say they mature in the daytime. So if the circadian clock or you can give more light when the light is there, they'll mature much quicker. And then another fact. We talk of evolution and the religious people talk of, especially Christians and the Muslims, that the God created it in the tweak, in a finger snap, 7 days at the most. Well, at one time, matter in the universe may have been perfectly liquid. They have discovered and recreated the first matter that appeared after the Big Bang in a large hadron collider. Now, they smashed the lead particles at 99.99999% the speed of light and recreated the first matter that appeared after the first bang. And after the Big Bang, the first matter that appeared was liquid, not water. It was the primordial matter known as QGP, quark glucose plasma. And this stage of evolution lasted for a few seconds. As a matter of fact, they say fraction of a second. But the scientists were able to prove that plasma's liquid-like qualities, finding it have less resistance to flow than any other substance, and then it started congealing. But this QGP enabled amoeba to come into being, and that was the start of life. We were talking of hummingbirds humming, and we were talking of the octopuses and the frogs and the fish that are absolutely like glass. But do you know that there is one bird which understands the concept of zero? We pride ourselves saying, well, the discovery of zero was a great achievement in human civilization. Crows may be bird brains. That means we think they have no brains, and the only job the crows do is to be a scavenger, to be a sweeper. But the feathered creatures can understand the highly abstract concept of zero. Now, the concept of zero is used in number system, fully developed in human society around the 5th century after Christ. Potentially, maybe a few centuries earlier, but the historical and the proofs are only of the 5th century. For instance, the notion of multiplying by 8 by 0 or adding 0 to 10 didn't emerge till the 5th century. The concept of none, zero, absence of inequality emerged much earlier, of course. As a matter of fact, it was a part of the Dost philosophy as well. So absence of inequality was there, but the difference from using zero as a distinct quantity by itself was new. So idea may sound obvious, but for the concept of zero as a numerical value underwent a dramatic transformation. But now you say how the birds understand it. The zero represents the emptiness, the absence of apples, for example. Someone can count 3 apples placed in a basket, 1, 2, 3. But when the basket is empty, there are no apples to count, it's zero. So the crows, Professor Nader saw, they had the crows, they started looking into the MRIs, the scans of the brains, and they discovered that the nerve cells of these crows, the neurons, encoded zero as did the other number. They were going to pick up, say, the intestines of the dead carrier, and immediately when there was nothing left, there would be a void. The brain activity patterns show that the idea of zero falls before one on closed mental number line. We also say 0, 1, 2, 3. So that's exactly the way crows think. And then, we talk of Antarctica and we always give credence to the fact that the first humans to discover Antarctica were the Westerns. No. Antarctica was discovered 1,300 years before the Westerns discovered it, and it was discovered by Polynesians. This research has been done in New Zealand, and they say the Maori tribe, Polynesian connection to the Antarctica, has been a part of the Antarctic story since the 7th century. They were going to Antarctica. And the indigenous history of Maoris reveals that they discovered this continent more than a millennial before the Westerns. And the Westerns spotted it only in 1820. So, 1300 years before that, the Maoris had discovered it. When the Westerns first reached Antarctica in the 19th century, a handful of Maoris joined them as crew members. And they were amazed that the Maoris knew about the island, the continent. And in the history of Maoris, since ancient times, Antarctica has been there. As a matter of fact, even the ancient Greeks theorized Antarctica existed as a lower continent to balance the Arctic. That was their concept. But the Antarctica toast, the land opposite Arctic, was just a balancing fact. The age of exploration, when Captain Cook came in 1700 to discover the northern parts. At that time, they were amazed that an officer of the Imperial Russian Army had already gone on a sealing trip to Antarctica, and he had been taken there by the Maoris. And before we end the last one, we are terrified by the coronavirus. But an ancient coronavirus had swept across whole of East Asia, Korea, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Philippines, 25,000 years ago. An ancient coronavirus infected the ancestors of the people living today. And this study has been saying that we are vulnerable to corona, but then we develop immunity. And that's why even this time, because of that 25,000 years ago epidemic, the people in East Asia haven't suffered as much as the people in other parts of the world have. The genes have increased the people's chance of surviving the old pathogens. So the DNA of the people living today has shown that they have developed antibodies which are resistant to coronavirus to a greater extent. But then, later on the people started moving and those antibodies started decreasing. And this was done by a study done on 2,500 people of 26 different human populations from the world. And then it was saying that 420 human proteins known to interact with coronavirus. Most of these proteins are only in East Asia. So the researchers found that the people of the East Asian ascent have already suffered from this, and then they did a carbon study and found that it had been done. The advent was 25,000 years back. Marvelous. So these are interesting facts of the world not known to us, but they are really amazing, awe-inspiring, and make us wonder, wow, what a brave new world that we live in. We are like Miranda of the Tempest, who can wander at the world with awe in our thoughts and excitement in our eyes. Thank you.